This episode is exclusively sponsored by Boehringer Ingelheim.
Good morning. My name is Montse Torremorell. I'm a faculty member at the University of Minnesota, and I have with me Dr. Gordon Sprong and Dr. Tom Wetzel. Hi, Tom. Hi, Gordon. How are you?
Ni hao.
Ni hao. Very good.
Hello. Hello, Tom and Muncie, and hello to all our listeners. And ni hao, ni man hao to our guest speaker that you'll introduce now, Muncie.
Yes, Tom, I guess you had the chance to practice your Chinese recently in China.
It's pretty weak yet, Monty. Pretty weak.
Very good. So we just came back from the visiting China. The three of us and some other colleagues from the U.S. attended the Lehman Swine Conference that we organized in China that took place in Chengdu in October. And we wanted to share with our listeners some of our impressions, right, of what we saw in China and some things we saw in the industry and a visit that we did to one of the largest, the largest producer in the world. So we want to do that and share that experience with our audience. But we also had the opportunity to connect with one of our alumni who is here today, Dr. Zhen Yang, who has a quite unique background. He actually came to the U.S. to do his PhD a few years ago. He graduated from the University of Minnesota and now is a faculty at Nanjing University. Zhen, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for your invitation, Monty, and good morning, everyone. As Monty said, my name is Zhen Yang. I graduated from University of Minnesota 2019. I got my DVM and master's degree in the swine certificate. And then I moved to Rome, Italy to have my one-year internship in FO. And then I came back to China in 2020 and become a faculty member at the Nanjing Agriculture University. So my primary goal here is teaching, research, and also have great connections with the swine industry in China and provide consulting services, organize meetings, and provide trainings to the industries. So I'm very happy to be here today.
It's very good to have you, Zhang. So I remember when you were a student, you were not always interested in swine, but it seems like you had experience, and then in China, you are playing a leading role at the university and in the industry. So we would like to get your perspective in terms of what is happening right now in China, in terms of the swine industry. Give us the high-level overview.
So while graduating, and I have my internship in FAO, I think John Dean told me a word, just come back to China as soon as you can, otherwise you will miss the bus. So why? Because ASF hit China in 2018. At that time, we have a very huge change in our industry, shifting from smallholders to large production companies. And that change can be made overnight. And then everything has changed from nutrition, from how we raise pigs traditionally, and also capitals flushing into the swine industry. And we have a huge dynamic of pork price, which create a huge loss for the industry, but also a great opportunity for those modern swine farms rose up. So I think in the past 6 and 7 years, we see the change in China history of swine industry, and that cannot be seen anywhere in the world.
Are we still talking about 40 million sows?
Yes, traditionally we have over 55 million from official figures before 2018, and we have some numbers go down quickly after the ASF, but then we have a huge recovery. And now at the moment this year, based on the official data, we more or less have about 40 million sows in China right now.
So there's a couple things that we heard while we were in China. One was there in this time frame since ASF, there's been a shift that's moved, like you said, to more consolidation. So what's called the backyard operations is diminishing rapidly. Correct, Zhen? But I think the number we heard was that there's still as much as 40% of the industry is at sites that have less than 500 sows. Does that sound right?
It really depends your statistics. I think we have very resilient smallholders right now, even though we have ASI breaks. Anyway, the proportion of large producer in China just take up a huge proportion. For example, right now the top 25 producing company in China, they owns over 9 million sows, which takes up to 1/4 of total sows numbers. But we have also some smallholders, but their numbers not small. And also some smallholders, we all call them a contractor. They may raise a lot of finishing pigs or nurturing pigs, but a few remain a few hundred sows, but they probably go and coming back and forth depending on the market price. So it's really dynamic situation here. We see now the big company, if they're doing right, they have a good financial money, they have capital, they are still expanding their sow inventory.
80 million sows in the world, 40 million of them are in China. So that for our audience, that's something you sort of have to pay attention to. So what happens in China in the swine industry, at least we have to have an understanding of what's happening, because it will impact half the world's pigs are in China, half the world's pork is eaten in China. So that's something that we should at least need to be aware of, Tom and Monty.
The ASF break that we had certainly has changed the structure there, and it's the haves and the have-nots a little bit. From what I understand, is that those that were fortunate enough not to go through severe or significant ASF breaks were able to really profit during that time because of the lack of pigs available, and that's where growth is occurring. And then there's those that really were suffered by that and struck by that, and many of those had to exit the industry or reduce dramatically what they were doing. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I will come that if they may not suffer from the ASF, but also they can manage the ASF. Or if a hit by ASF, they can quickly manage and control and contain it. They can still be profitable when the pork price is very high. So the key is if you can control, contain, and prevent ASF at that time.
Yeah. And to me, that's one of the things. I mean, just the change in production, and then moving to these super big farms, these high rises, in which many of those pigs, I don't know how many sows. Do you know, Zhen, how many sows may be in that production system? Because everything is controlled there, and I know we will talk more about it. But do we have an estimate?
Well, to be honest, I don't know exact number, how many sows raising the high rises. The background why people choose to high rise at that time, because we have a limited land, can be approved to start new farms. So if you want to raise as many sows as you can, you need to build up the buildings so they can catch the good markets. So that's why you see a lot of high rises or multi-story buildings or pork producing complex were started in 2020-21 to catch the very good markets. But some of them remain empty when the pork price is dropping low, because cost of production is still high in some regions, or if you raise the pigs in high rises. Yeah.
Well, before we get into high rises, there's a couple other things we got to, I think, remember about the Chinese industry that we heard. One is your population of people in China is a significant issue, and the projections are that you're going to drop your population by a pretty large number. And with that, the potential consumption of pork is going to be significantly lower overall in the country. So the need for less sows seems to be on the radar screen of the people that are in charge of pork production in China, which is going to play a big role in what happens here in the future.
And the other thing, Tom, to that is I took some numbers about the average pigs per sow per year, at least for some of these companies, was still relatively, you could argue, low. I mean, with a lot of opportunity to growth, right? I mean, maybe in that 23, 24 pigs per sow per year. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. But if you think about then productivity, the potential of the animals to go up to 30 or more pigs per sow per year, you will not need as many sows just because of that. So I think that's an interesting trend to also keep in mind. And the other thing that caught my attention is that it seemed like you are dealing with some of the same issues that we're dealing in the US that has to do with labor, right? And then that it's hard often to find people who want to work in farms. And you're taking a bit of a different approach because, at least for what we could see, it seems like you're investing a lot on technology. Tell us a bit more about that, and that will be our segue to talk about the producer.
Sure. I think the technical-driven or those in consolidated companies really raised the bar of swine production in China, which we have high proficiency than 6-7 years ago, which means we do not need as many sows as before to produce in single amount of pig. Now, in the long-term rise, the population will be a concern. But if the income of the people raise up, we still need more pork in short term. But production-driven, the efficiency, technology, they definitely need good labor. So in the past few years, you can see those big companies recruit a lot of college students to raise pigs. Some have master or even PhD degrees. They hired into the raise pig as a manager or as a researcher in their own research institute, nutrition, animal health, even pharmaceuticals, drugs, etc. So we are seeing a lot of high-paid job in the past few years when the pork price is really good. So really attract a lot of talents of college students, push them to the swine industry. So, but on the other hand, we don't have, those kids may raise in the cities, not from rural areas, or their family do not run the swine business. So there will be a gap, or there's a gaps here that we need a lot of training for those students to be familiar with the swine production, but also that will be a cost for the swine company as well.
It's very clear after our visit that you have a lot of younger people that are entering into industry. Yeah. I mean, that's amazing what we saw there. We're going to talk about Moyen, the largest producer that we were able to visit. And we sat in the room, the leadership team, Gordon and Monsi there. And my goodness, there was a lot of people under the age of 35 in that room that we sat and talked with that day.
Yeah, that's a good point. It was very impressive. And let's talk about Muyan. Husband and wife started the company in 1992. I think it started with a handful of pigs, right? And then start working, start growing the farms. And I remember I went to China, I think it was 2012. And at that time, they were talking about going public. They put the company in the market. I think they did that in 2014. And since then, they started a big expansion. So right now, they are about 3 million sows, if I am correct. And they sell how many pigs? It's a lot of pigs.
60 some million total pigs they sold, right?
Yeah.
They slaughter about 40 some million. Gordon, is that right?
Yeah, they have some. Yeah, they're selling piglets. Also, they purchase piglets from other sources. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
we very impressive. We visited their home office. We visited their high-rise farms. One of their high-rise farms. We visited their slaughter plant. We visited their technology center. Basically full of robots and what I would call smart farming technology. So we could talk about any of those topics. And maybe to start that, maybe Zhen, you comment, where does Muyan fit into the Chinese industry and their influence on the industry?
Well, definitely Muyan is number one leading swine company in China, 30 million sows, and although they paid very good job to attract talents, so they hire thousands of graduates with a lot of strong research capacities. So that's why you see there are a lot of new technologies has been applied in their system smart farmings, even the new pharmaceuticals, vaccines has been used in our system, precise ventilations, a lot of biosecurity modifications. They also have the engineer groups to design their buildings, to have adaptations to several generations, to remodel their farms. So a lot of fascinating things happening here. We call this a kingdom of swine industry in China. Yeah.
It's very much when we visited Moyen, it was very much evident that they pride themselves in the visual of a very, very profitable, good company. I mean, what you saw was, I mean, we stayed in a Moyen hotel that they had themselves. They got a full campus there that would rival any small college campus in the United States today for the kind of buildings they have and the kind of structure and infrastructure that's there. To me, one of the most impressive things I saw at Moyen was their culture. And they really drive culture into their people and get it to the point where they have a very strong belief in their system, belief in their values and what they're trying to accomplish. Gordon, we tried to translate some of the stuff that was on the walls, and it was pretty evident that those things are embedded pretty deeply.
And it wasn't just about
culture is very apparent. Yeah, that's right.
And it wasn't just about themselves making profit. It was about helping the communities and helping reduce poverty and giving back the communities. And I think that's something caught my attention too. The amount of investment they've made to support a couple of universities, again, to help them develop some of the technology expertise. And then also some of the programs they have to invest on better technologies to use less water or less energy and, control odor. I mean, so I thought that was very interesting as well to your point, Tom, about the culture.
I think we have to talk about the high rises though. And it was, we were able to get into one of those. And by the way, they had it set up in that one where it's, you get into an elevator and you go, there's 4 stories, right, in that building, and you start at the top and you got gestation, then you and breeding, and then you go down to farrowing, and then you go to nursery, and then a grower finisher on each level with 4,000 sows total in each complex, farrow to finish. Yeah. And it was the technology is really good. The question that I think we all had is how good is their production, and especially when it's the health. And can that system survive and compete with what we know about what can happen with health, and even just with the ability to do good animal husbandry?
Yeah, just one comment on So you describe one of the buildings, right? 4,000 sows in one
Correct.
building, but in the complex there were 21 of them at least in this
That's
system
right.
that we want. So just imagine that it's closer to 90,000 sows, and then there were 6 floors. Tom, I counted that.
Sorry, yeah, that's
okay.
right. That's right. There was multiple floors there. We didn't get to. We didn't see all those floors. Yeah.
That's very impressive. And the other thing from a biosecurity perspective that I thought was very interesting, it was all air filtration, for instance. All the air coming in was filtered, which was also commented as many other farms in China are filtering. Some of these large, it's a given. I mean, if you want to be in the business, you have to filter. But you also were treating the air coming out of the buildings, like with scrubbers, I believe you call them, air scrubbers, more to reduce odor, but also decreases the pathogens. So that's something caught my attention. And then just, you could see cameras everywhere, right? The pigs were, there were cameras everywhere. And then they were estimating the weight of the pigs as the pigs were growing. So that's another thing caught my attention.
Yeah, Gordon, remember when we went through the offices, they took us into a room, and it had a big board on it. And on this big board, they're showing their pig prices, and it looked like they were buying and selling on that board, and they were watching productivity. And you had a whole series of desks with young people sitting at these desks at their computers, and it looked like it was like a control central station for their pork production system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was pretty impressive. Jen, Can you give our audience just a little bit more background on these high-rise buildings and how many approximately in China, how many producers are using this technology? We're describing one here at Muyen. How are all top 25 companies using high-rise, and how much variation is there? And are they still building them today as we speak?
So as I said, to be honest, I don't know how many exact numbers high-rise buildings in China. But first, now all the companies own high-rises, and they still own different opinions how we can efficiently raise pigs in those buildings. Some work, some didn't. So we have a saying here: the building is not the buildings. So if the company doing really good job, they can survive through those buildings and they can achieve the benefits. But sometimes they may fail. So that's why we call the building is not the building. So for Muyen, they think they're successful, they're doing a great job. But some company, they think the flat or one floor swine barn still works the best for them. But anyway, if you have limited land, we have good biosecurity, and you know the flow, you can make sure the quality of the buildings do not leaking, for example. You may be successful, but it really depends. And we see the cost of production in buildings start to decline per year. I think the experience of raising pigs in those buildings gains. So that can partially explain the cost of production of raising pigs. Those buildings start to decline.
Zheng, I can see a lot of opportunities for you and your students as they enter the industry to in some way learn how to manage disease in those settings, right? Because it's probably will be different than what we did before in more of the traditional systems. What are the maybe 2 or 3 observations that you have on how to raise the pigs or how to control disease in those settings that you can share with us, or opportunities even that you see for you and your students as you train them?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things is biosecurity. The philosophy of biosecurity in those buildings was different than what we learned in the past. We think that what is internal, what is external. The definition of internal, external will varies in different buildings. And also you have mentioned we use a lot of filtration systems right now, but some buildings do not apply filtration, but others apply the filtrations. But even you apply the filtrations, you have different types of filtration system. While the disease dynamics in the buildings are different. So that's why we have one set of building only results, and the others may have reading cells, nurturing, and finishers. So we have to see different modes and the production, and also these different disease challenge. So I think lots of opportunities here, how to dig into it, how to control and manage disease in those high rises in the future.
Well, that's great. That was a great overview, and maybe some closing comments. I mean, Gordon, you also have a lot of experience in China. What are your comments too in terms of how the producers are doing? And
sure, 20 years ago, going to China to today, way different, right? As Zhen opened with, back then it was a backyard system with 55 million sows. Today, 40 million sows, maybe going to 20 million sows. We heard speakers at the Layman conference say, listen, our industry only needs 20 million sows. Well, that's a dramatic shift. Then from backyard outdoor to reminding me of Grandpa's farm, right outside, to indoor, high rise, complete filtration, both air in and out. And then to hear speakers say, listen, we're going to rely less on soybeans for our protein.
Right.
And Muyen, the company that we visited, is building their own amino acid plant. So there's dramatic changes happening in the Chinese industry that I think our North American industry should pay attention to. So, and the shift, as Zhen has said, right, John Dean was wise. Go there now because the change is occurring, and it happened. And COVID and ASF drove a lot of those changes. The intervention for ASF turned out to be biosecurity, and part of the biosecurity was the aerosol intervention, and that's why they use filters there. And so at the trade show at Layman, the vendors that are selling filters and providing ventilation they dominated the the trade show. So a lot of changes, Monty and Tom and Jim. So
by the way, that trade show at Layman, China, draws 10,000 people to the pig trade show that's associated with Layman, China. Just an amazing to walk. You can't walk at all. It's so big, that exhibition area where all the people are at the trade show.
Yeah,
Actually,
the China is one of the biggest swine conference in China. I believe also one of the biggest swine conference in the world.
Yeah, that's right. And that's where we had the opportunity to interact with you and many others. And that was a very rewarding experience, and certainly something we want to continue doing because we are always learning. So with that, see you next time at the meeting. Thank you, Zheng.
Thank you.
This episode is exclusively sponsored by Boehringer Ingelheim. The views, opinions, or positions expressed are those of the speakers and may not reflect those of any other organization.